I'm the Youth Services Consultant with the State Library of Iowa and the chair of the Teen and Kids All Iowa Reads committees. Um, just to go over our itinerary today, we are going to share with you the introduction of the All Iowa Reads program. Basically, what is this program? We are also going to have our three authors share their wonderful books with you today. First, we'll have Alan Eskens. He is the author of The Quiet Librarian. That is the adult selection for this year. Afterwards, we will talk with Travis T.L. Simpson. He is the author of the teen selection, Strong Like You. And we will also talk with the children's author, Kate Messner, author of The Trouble with Heroes. And we'll also, for each title, we'll also honor the committees for each group. Afterwards, I will be sharing some All I Reads resources, some upcoming events, and closing remarks as well. So, if you have questions or whatnot, feel free to add them in the chat. Make sure you put in the chat your first name and last name, where you're from, so we can all see where you're from. But yes, feel free to ask questions because this is a webinar for you to get to know the authors and the books and the awesome committee members who have came together to um, to select this year's All I Reads Award winners. And so, a lot of people don't know, what is the All I Reads program? The All I Reads program is a program where Iowans throughout the whole state, they come together to discuss one book. And so all of the committees from the teens to the
I'm in the
kids,
webinar, Tom.
okay, there's Helen. Okay, there you go. Helen, welcome. Welcome, welcome. There's Helen. Helen, I was just explaining to everybody what the All I Reads program is. Would you like to share what the All I Reads program is? I don't want to steal your thunder, so
That's okay. Can you hear me, everybody?
yes, we can.
Excellent. Good morning. Well, okay. All Our Reads was established in 2003, which makes it one of the state library's longest running programs. And I should add to this, absolutely, in the history of the state library, definitely one of our most successful programs. It keeps on giving out and giving back in the same year and in different years. It's amazing how this happens. It's like magic. Anyway, the purpose of All Our Reads, as you probably already know, is to foster a sense of unity through reading, so that Iowans are encouraged to come together in their communities to talk and read about the same book in the same year. Originally, All Iowa Reads consisted of the adult program, but these days we have three programs. We have the adult, we also have the teens, which includes readers from 12 to 18 approximately. I've read some of the teen choices myself as an adult, and I have to say that they are about the same reading level that I read at, which is wonderful. And the titles that are chosen for this program are wonderful. We also have a kids program, which is for kids about ages 8 to 12 approximately. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, I'm not getting the slides set. There we go. All right. Um, Before I go to Alan, I would be very remiss if I didn't introduce the committee members of our All Iowa Reads committee. They're all wonderful library staff, librarians from public libraries around the state, and one who is a school librarian and one who is a bookstore owner. So the school librarian is the first on the list, Alicia Patton from Heartland AA in Johnston. And then Ellen Coughlin from Ankeny Public Library, Hunter Gillen representing bookstores and publishers. Hunter actually has a bookstore in Beaverdale in Des Moines. Kayla Becker, he is one of our co-chairs from Norwalk Public Library, not far from Des Moines, Norwalk Easter Public Library. Also, Leslie Heinzler is the other co-chair from the Iowa Department of the Blind. Then we have Leslie Noble, who I think Leslie told me that she's actually here today in our audience from Urbandale Public Library. Also, Mike Jorgensen from Coralville Public Library and Wendy Johnston from Carroll Public Library. I'm so appreciative of all the people on this committee because they're year-round readers and their job involves the written word and authors and events to do with writing and all the wonderful things that libraries do so well. Year long, these folks read and they bring their recommendations to the committee meetings so that we can discuss each one. And people read portions of the books, and then we come together to discuss what they've read. And we come up with a different list based on this. And then it's a real process that goes through a number of hoops before we get to the final cut, so to speak. And then they decide from a short list of titles and come up with a read for the next year. And of course, this is a really good one. Alan, wonderful to have you here. Most of the people who are participating in this workshop today have not read the book. So for most of them, it's going to be a pleasure to come. That being said, I'm going to say a few short words of introduction to Alan. Okay, so Alan Eskens grew up in a very neighboring state. I know it well, the wooded hills of Missouri. And after high school, migrated north to pursue his education. He acquired a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from University of Minnesota, which is actually my alma mater as well, and a Juris Doctorate from Hamline University School of Law, which I lived almost a stone's throw from Hamline for many years in St. Paul. So small world. He honed his creative writing skills at the MFA program at Minnesota State University and took classes at the Iowa Summer Writing Festival and the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis. Alan is the best-selling author of The Life We Bury, The Guise of Another, The Heavens May Fall, The Stolen Hours, Forsaken Country, and Saving Emma. The Quiet Librarian is his latest novel. So he is also, and again, a lot of this is related to mysteries, I believe. He's recipient of the Barry Award, Minnesota Book Award, Left Coast Crime Award, and Silver Falchion Award, and has been a finalist for the Edgar Award, Thriller Award, Anthony Award, and Nero Award. His books have been translated into 23 languages. So anyway, about the book, for those of you who have not read it yet. Hannah Babick is a quiet middle-aged librarian in Minnesota who wants nothing more than to be left alone. And when a detective arrives with the news that her best friend has been murdered, Hannah knows that something evil has come for her, a dark remnant of her past and her friend, that her friend had shared. 30 years before, Hannah was somebody else. Nura Duvac, a teenager growing up in the mountains of war-torn Bosnia, until Serbian soldiers arrived to slaughter her entire family before her eyes. The events of that day thrust Nura into the war, leading her in to join a band of militia fighters, where she became not only a fierce warrior, but a legend, the deadly Night Mora. But a shattering final act forced Nura to flee to the United States with a bounty on her head. Now somebody is hunting Hannah, and her friend has paid the price, leaving her 8-year-old grandson in Hannah's care. To protect the child without revealing her secret, Hannah must again become the Night Mora and hope she can find the killer before the past comes for them too. So, on that note, it is my pleasure to turn things over to Alan. And welcome and
Good morning.
go ahead.
Thank you so much. And I want to start off by saying it is a true honor to be selected for the All Iowa Reads. I have ties to the state that didn't make it into my bio. I was actually born in Lamar, Iowa. My father was a farmhand outside of Lamar, and a year after my birth, he took the family to Missouri, where he um, fell in love with hanging sheetrock and started a drywall company. I also spent 3 years at the University of Iowa when I first left, which I'll talk about in a second. But again, thank you for selecting my book. And when I speak at libraries, what I'd like to talk about is my journey to becoming an author, because my journey is not like most writers. Uh, uh, in search of what it was that made me become a writer, I found, I think, the seed of my being a writer on my first grade report card. It was in a bin in my mother's closet in Missouri. And on that report card, my teacher, Sister Ronald Marie, wrote a note to my parents. And in that note is an explanation of why I'm a writer today. She wrote, Alan dreams too much when work is to be done. And that kind of explains why I'm a writer. I love daydreaming. I've always loved daydreaming. It was my favorite part of school. You put me near a window and I was gone. And because of that and other things, I was not a good student. I was one of those kids who always had to worry about whether or not I was going to be held back from one year to the next. And it didn't bother me that I wasn't a good student because, like I said, my father had a drywall company. From my earliest memories, I worked for that drywall company. So I always kind of figured I was going to go into construction and didn't need a big resume for that. So I was okay with just barely getting by. But then something happened when I was in fifth grade that changed the trajectory of my life. And it happened because of a teacher. My fifth grade teacher got me into the school play. Now, I didn't even know there was a school play. And to be in the play, you were supposed to be a sixth, seventh, or eighth grader, which I was not. But my teacher saw something in me. She saw this creative side that she wanted to nurture. So she got me an audition and I got a part. And not only did I get a part, I got the best part in the whole play, which wasn't the lead. The best part in the whole play was the only character who got to say a cuss word. So I'm a fifth grader in a Catholic school in a very conservative part of Missouri, and I played this prisoner who was going to be hanged. And in my scene, this priest was trying to get me to confess my sins before they hanged me. And the first performance was grades 1 through 4. And I'm sitting backwards in this chair on stage, and the priest is doing his lines, and he says, Are you sure you won't confess your sins? And I say, Yes, I'm sure. Damn it, go away. And when I said, Damn it, those little kids, their eyes lit up, and I became a celebrity. And I thought, I like this acting thing. Well, my school didn't put on any more plays. I went back to my old ways of being a poor student. And by the time I graduated from eighth grade into high school, I absolutely hated school. I didn't want to be there. Um, my only claim to fame was that I wrote the most written punishments of anybody in my class in my grade. Um, and when I got into high school, I vowed that I was going to do nothing extracurricular. I was going to just do my 4 years of time, be done, go hang sheetrock or do construction. And my first semester, I stuck to my guns. Didn't go out for anything. Uh, didn't try. Flunked 2 classes, algebra and Spanish, and learned a valuable lesson. I learned that when you flunk a class, you got to go to summer school. But if you get a D, you don't. So I had a new goal in life. I was going to be a D student at least. Well, spring semester rolls around and my school's putting on a play. And I was talking to my best friend about that play I did in 5th grade, how much fun it was. And somehow by the end of that conversation, we dared each other to audition for Oklahoma. I'd never even seen a musical, much less been in one. We audition, we both get in, and it was so much fun. And the really wonderful thing about high school plays versus grade school plays is at the end of the high school play, when that final curtain comes down, everybody's really emotional and everybody's going around hugging each other. And here I am, this geeky freshman, getting hugs from these beautiful junior and senior women. And I'm thinking, why would anybody play football when they can do this? So I became a theater guy and I fell in love with theater. I found something that I was passionate about for the first time in my life. And it made me want to go to school. It made me want to be a better student. I was still getting, C's for the most part in my classes, with the exception of anything theater, course related, anything that didn't have homework in it, really. I was getting A's. So that helped balance things out. And by the time I graduated, um, I loved doing theater so much that I decided I wanted to go to college. No one in my family had ever gone to college. Um, and I really didn't know what I was doing, but I thought if I could just get into college, I can do theater for a little while longer before I have to go hang sheetrock. So that was my motivation. And I applied to a few colleges, honestly thinking I wasn't going to get in, but I got accepted at the University of Iowa. And I chose Iowa for a couple reasons. Number one, it was outside of Missouri, so I knew that my father couldn't have me hanging sheetrock on weekends. But also they had a good theater department, and the drinking age was only 19. So there was my big decision making process. So I go to Iowa, and my first paper, literary paper that I have to turn in, it's an essay on Shakespeare's Othello, and I get an F. Now I thought I wrote a pretty good paper. I started writing it about 8 o'clock the night before it was due, and I stayed up all night working on it. But I got an F. And the professor brought me back to his office and he asked me if I had ever taken an English class in high school. And I said, well, yeah, but I really wasn't paying attention. And it scared me because I really liked being at the University of Iowa. I loved it. I had friends, I had a community, I had a fake ID, I had everything I needed. I was rocking college. And I thought, I really wanted to stay here. And that led me to go buy books on how to write. E.B. White, Donald Strunk's Element of Style was one of the books I bought. I read it cover to cover multiple times because I wanted to improve my writing skills so I could stay in college. And my grades went up. And over the course of my college experience, I transferred from Iowa to the University of Minnesota, finished my degree there. And by the time I graduated, I was a straight A student, something that I did not know was in me when I first went to college. And I thought, what would it have been like if I tried from the very beginning to be a good student? So, with that as my motivation and a deep-seated desire to see how much I could rack up in student loans, I went to law school and I thrived in law school. I did really well. I graduated law school with a wonderful resume, law review, in a court, moot court. I have international awards for my legal writing. And I get out of law school. I get a job in St. Peter, Minnesota, and I pass the bar. And the summer of 1992, I'm sitting at my desk and I realize that something is missing. Excuse me. Something is missing in my life. And what it was that love for the creative side that I had developed in theater. I wanted to do something creative just for myself. So I sat down and I wrote a short story and I liked it. I enjoyed the process. Um, but I didn't know if it was any good because I hadn't really taken any, writing classes in college. So I bought a book on storytelling and I read that book and I was interested in that. And I went back to that short story and I rewrote it. Then I bought another book, then another book. And I kept rewriting the short story and pretty soon it became a novel length manuscript. But I wasn't sure if what I was writing was any good because I was just reading books on it. So I started taking classes. I started at the Iowa Summer Writers Festival, and I was taking classes just to see if what I was reading in these craft books were translating to the page. And I really, again, I found a passion for something that I didn't expect. I loved the understanding of the craft of writing. And I wasn't doing this to get published. I wasn't doing this because I wanted to become a famous author or be rich as a writer. I had a law practice. I had a family. I had a whole nother life, but in my spare time, I was writing just for my own enjoyment. And I did that for 20 years. And for 20 years, I worked on that one story. And after 20 years, it wasn't ready. So I set it aside and I had another idea for a story. And I wrote that one. And over the course of that 20 years, I discovered something important about myself. And it came into sharp focus when I saw a quote by Rainer Maria Rilke in Letters to a Young Poet. The young poet asks Rilke, how do I know if I am a writer? And Rilke replied, ask yourself in your most solemn moments, must I write? If the answer is yes, then you are a writer. And I was practicing law, I was a father, I was raising a family, but in my spare time, what I enjoyed doing was writing, and I was a writer. So I wrote this second manuscript. And when I finished it, I thought, I think this one might actually be good enough to get published. So I decided to see what would happen. I sent it out to some agents, well, a lot of agents, and I got rejected by a lot of agents. I got rejected by 150 agents. I had a list of 172, and I told myself when I get to the bottom of that 172 list, I'm going to put this book aside and I'm going to focus on another book that I'm going to write because I'm a writer and I'm not doing this to get published. I'm doing this because I enjoy writing. Well, 150 agents rejected me, but number 151 sent me an email saying, let's take a look at this, do a revision, and I'll represent you. So I did the revision. I had to change the title. The book became um, The Life We Bury. My agent was able to find a publisher within just a few weeks, and I signed a contract. I was going to be a published author now. Again, just kind of a bucket list, what if start to my writing career. But by the time I got that contract, I had my first manuscript that I've been working on in the drawer. I had a third manuscript first drafted um, based on one of the characters from The Life We Bury. And so I went back to my agent and I said, hey, what if we, did a 3-book deal for Max Rupert from The Life We Bury? And the reason I wanted a 3-book deal was because I'd been reading about people getting 3-book deals. I thought it sounded really cool. So I posed it. My agent took it to my editor, and before The Life We Bury came out, I had 4 books under contract, and that began my journey as a writer. By the time the fourth book came out, I had retired from the practice of law and I was a full-time writer, which is amazing when I hear myself say that because it was never the goal. It was never, a dream of mine to be a writer. I just was doing it because I wanted to be creative. And now what I enjoy doing, my hobby, has become what I can do to make a living now. So I eventually published that first manuscript, became my sixth novel called Nothing More Dangerous. Um, I've written primarily about a community of characters that I created in the life we bury. There's four characters, Joe Talbot, Max Rupert, Lila Nash, and Bodhi Sandin. And my first nine novels all revolve around those four characters. Nothing More Dangerous is a prequel for Bodhi Sandin's story. There's a four-book arc for Max Rupert, three-book arc for Joe and Lila. And those were met with success. I got a number of awards and nominations. I'm became a bestseller. And then one day I was going to a library event to speak, and I had some time to kill. So I was watching a movie that I'd seen before, a movie called The Reader. And as I am apt to do, I was daydreaming about, stories as I'm watching this movie. And the movie is about a middle-aged woman in post-World War II Germany. And about a third of the way into the movie, you learn a secret about her. Now you feel about her a certain way up until that point, and then when you learn that secret, she hasn't changed, but your opinion of her has. And I like that idea. So I get in my car and I'm driving to this library to do an event. And as I'm driving, I'm daydreaming and I'm thinking if I were going to write a story about a middle-aged woman who has a secret, what would it be? And that was the birth of The Quiet Librarian. Uh, I think I made her a librarian because I was on my way to a library event at that time. And she's a woman who she grew up in Bosnia and she became part of the war. She didn't want to be. She wanted to be left alone. Her family was trying to, stay out of it, but that was not allowed. They were thrust into the war, and she became a fighter for the Bosniaks, and eventually a refugee here in the United States. And as I was writing this novel, before I started writing it, I was researching it, and I knew so little about the war in Bosnia. I grew up during that time. I was practicing law. I had a daughter, and I would see it on the news, and I would mark, yes, okay, there's a war going on, but I really didn't pay attention. When I started researching this, I learned so much. It's such a complex war. Um, and I realized partway into my research that I was not going to be able to do this book justice without help. So I reached out to the University of Minnesota to see if anybody there would help me understand, what it was like to grow up in Bosnia. I also reached out to, we have a very strong Bosnian community here in Minnesota. I reached out to them and I got two people who volunteered to help me. One was a young woman who was now a doctor. She's a professor at the university. She grew up in a town called Banja Luka during the war. And Banja Luka was a Serbian held city, but she was a Bosnian. And the stories she told me about growing up in Banja Luka would just raise the hair on the back of my neck. How how stunningly horrific things were over there. And the other person who helped me out was a man who, as a teenager, was manning the trenches in Srebrenica. Now, Srebrenica has a special place in the war. It was a city that was under siege by the Serbs for most of the war. And then one day he sees helicopters come in and take the generals and fly them out of Srebrenica. So he knows the city is going to fall. And he and a friend come up with this audacious plan. They leave the city, they swim across the river into Serbian held territory and surrender. And they're put into a prison for the rest of the war, which was incredibly fortunate for him because when the Serbs entered Srebrenica, they instigated a massacre of 8,000 men and boys. It's one of the worst massacres. It was the worst massacre of the war. Um, and so he is telling me stories about what it was like during the war. And I couldn't have written this without them. I have a nice acknowledgement at the beginning of the book to them, and it's dedicated to those who died during the war and were affected by the war. But it was an incredible journey to write this book. It was one of those stories that just it wouldn't let go. It wasn't part of my world that I'd created from my characters from the Life of Barry. My editor was all for letting me write it, and when I finished it, I took a year off because I just really needed some time after writing that story. It's a very powerful story. Um, it's it's full of hope, but it's also there's some very dark, truthful episodes in there. But it's a book I'm very, very proud of. So I'm really, really, really glad that uh, Iowa has chosen this as their um, All Iowa Reads. I think it's an important book. It is factually as accurate as I could make it, not having grown up there. But yeah, I finished that. It came out, and I'm very pleased with it. I'm working now on my 11th novel, which because I enjoyed that historical fiction, historical fiction part of it. I wanted to write something that had a historical fiction aspect to it as well, and I have a character that I've written about in 5 novels as a secondary character, who is Mung. So my next book will have a aspect of it that's historical that goes back to the secret war in Laos. Um, but I got to tell you, I cannot believe how fortunate I am to be a writer, to be able to sit in my basement on the coldest days of the Minnesota winter and not have to leave, just, daydream like Sister Ronald Marie protested about, daydream and type and do this for a living. So again, I want to thank you for selecting my book. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions if there are any. I don't see any in the.
You sort of touched on this, but can you tell us a bit more about your writing process when you start to connect
Yes,
pieces and how it all starts to come together and how the creativity flows through it? And you know,
absolutely.
yes.
My favorite part of the writing process will always be the daydreaming. Uh, I buy a big sketchbook and open it up to white pages. I have a seed of an idea. You know, middle-aged woman with a dark secret hiding in plain sight here in Minnesota. That was my seed. What's her dark secret? What's her past? And I just sit there and I write down ideas. My brain goes like this. It's so it snaps really fast. So I'm writing down my ideas to try and slow my thought process down. Uh, Also, there's something I learned when I was in theater, and that is your first idea is usually not going to be your best idea. There's an exercise where a teacher will put like a chair on stage, line the actors up on the side, and say, "Okay, everybody walk out, sit in that chair, or use that chair as a prop, and do a small scene." Well, if you're the first person out, the chair is a school desk, a bus stop bench, a car seat. If you're number 14, 15 in line, those ideas are going to be gone by the time you get there. So when you're in the back of the line, you are going deep into your creativity and your thought process. What can I do with that chair that no one else is going to think about? That is reflected in how I outline when I'm daydreaming. I write down ideas and think, okay, that's a good idea. Let's go one more deeper. Another idea, go deeper. And so I just keep filtering these ideas, turn the page, expand upon them, percolate. And by the end of that sketchbook, I have a pretty clear outline of what the novel is going to be. Once I have that done, then I sit down to write. So I know the book from beginning to end. I know every chapter, what the chapter is about, why it's there. I keep myself open to making changes as I go. Again, your first idea isn't always your best. But I will then outline each chapter. What's this chapter about? What's at stake in this chapter? Where's the tension? What's the arc of the chapter? And I'll outline the chapter. Then I'll sit down and think, okay, let's pretend that this is the only chapter a reader's going to read. So let's write this as if this is a short story, that this chapter in and of itself is enough to make the reader enjoy what they've read. Then I start writing. And at that point, I'm falling back on 20 years of studying craft and understanding technique of how to write sentences and build tension and stuff like that. So I sit in my most comfortable chair. It's a recliner in my basement rec room, laptop on my lap, headphones on just so I can stay inside my head, and I type. And at the end of the day, there's a book there. Okay, I saw a question. Let's start with, does your law background, do you use it in the novels? I used my law background, yes. I initially didn't think I was going to be a mystery writer. I planned to be a literary novelist, but I knew that world so well that I couldn't, pull myself away from it. So what I decided to do was I was going to write stories where the mystery is the vehicle, and I use that mystery to tell the human story. The mystery in The Quiet Librarian is the death of Amina. Who killed Amina and why? The true story is the toll that war has on a person and how the aftermath of a war stays with someone uh, for decades or forever, and how to deal with it. So it was the vehicle of death of Amina, but it was really a story about the impact of the war. But yes, I do use my law background. Um, the story I'm writing now was inspired by when I was a young man, young attorney. I represented a man who was he was in a mental hospital. He had been tortured to the point where he couldn't speak. He was a Montagnard, an ally of ours in Vietnam. And that person that I met 30, 40 years ago stayed with me. In Saving Emma, there's a character that is based on someone I met as an attorney. I don't write about actual cases of mine, but I'm inspired by things that I came across in my legal experiences to make my writing more authentic, make my stories more authentic. So, do you make an outline first or just start writing scenes? I make an outline. I make a prodigious outline. I can do pages and pages of outline. I also have a big whiteboard that when I get my sketchbook done, I'll go to the whiteboard and re-outline it on the whiteboard based on, for example, different points of view. So the red will be this person's point of view, the green will be this person's point of view, blue this person, or back and forth in time. Um, you know, so I can see how the chapters are lining up and how one chapter leads into the next, even though there's 30 years separating the two. So yes, I outline like crazy. I am a big advocate for outlining just because it's worked for me. It's something that if you're a young or emerging writer and you're struggling, go outline. When I worked on that first manuscript for 20 years and it wasn't ready, I hadn't outlined it. I just sat down and started writing. So before I rewrote it to try and get it published, I started from scratch with an outline and worked from there. And it was a much better book then. Are you available to connect with Iowa libraries for book discussions? Absolutely. I do in-person visits. There is a fee for that, but I also do Zoom visits. And as of right now, I'm not charging for the Zoom visits. I love talking about myself. So yeah, I do that. Uh, what has been your favorite story to write? Nothing more dangerous. Just because that's literally the story that made me become a writer. I started writing it just to have a creative outlet because the law was not as creative as I was hoping it would be. And all the technique and craft that I developed was I learned it to write that story better, just to write it. Now, again, not to get it published, just to get it written. You said that you were enjoying yourself at the University of Iowa, so I wanted to ask about why you transferred to U of A, Minnesota. Uh, I transferred because I took up a degree in journalism. I decided that I wasn't going to be an actor, and the U of M had a terrific journalism school, top three in the country at the time. And I wasn't a big planner. It wasn't a good idea. I should have stayed at Iowa because I lost a lot of credits in the transfer. But looking back now, it worked out. Going along with the writing process, how much research do you do for your novels? It depends on the novel. The Quiet Librarian, I did a ton of research. I spent the better part of a year researching and outlining before I started writing, just because there was so much to learn. The book I'm doing now, there's a lot to learn about the secret war in Laos, and the type of military operations there were, and the re-education camps they had there. But if I'm writing about like a Max Rupert story, which is more just kind of a mystery thriller type novel, I know the law. I know how courts work. I know how police departments collect evidence. I don't have as much research for those, because I have so much background and experience in that world. So it really does depend on the novel I'm writing. My library is on the border of Minnesota, and our patrons love your books. Wonderful to hear. A bunch of us have been up to Sweet Reads in Austin. When you have done a program. Last year, I included the library in our book club and introduced you to a few more patrons. They couldn't wait for the rest to read the rest of your books. Well, thank you. That's very nice. Um, oh, just another compliment. Okay, well, I see that my time is up. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you all today, and I will pass it back to, I think, Helen now.
Okay, thank you so much, Alan. This has been amazing. I personally, I sort of, dr dived right into what you were saying. So it became, everything going on around me was invisible. It's just a magical presentation. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I apologize to everybody who was waiting for me to get in earlier. I couldn't get in. We had connectivity problems in my office here, but obviously they got resolved eventually. So that being said, thank you so much, and we can head on. Janae, I think you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Alan, and thank you, Helen. I took some notes from Alan. Very fascinating process. So thank you. We are going to switch gears and move to the teen selection for the 2026 All I Reads program. And before we get into the selection, I want to give a shout out and a big thank you to our teen All I Reads committee members. This group of members looked through, I want to say at least 20 plus teen books, read 50 pages of each book, then winnowed down that list to a short list. And they did a fantastic job of having meaningful, thoughtful discussions and selecting books that have mass appeal for all teens. So I want to take this moment to say thank you, a big thank you, and please say a thank you in the chat as well to Lauren Roberts of Oxford Public Library, Megan Schnicke from Bondurant Community Library, Alex Hansen of Manson Public Library, Bailey Koenig Gerke from Carnegie Stout Public Library, and Heather Pingree from Gibson Memorial Library. These guys did a phenomenal job. So please, if you know them or if you're in the chat, please make sure you say thank you because they did a wonderful job. And with that, I have the wonderful honor of introducing our author for the Teen All Our Reads program, Travis T.L. Simpson. And before I let Travis speak. I'm going to share his biography with you all. Uh, Travis T.L. Simpson is an award-winning novelist and journalist whose young adult fiction has received national and regional acclaim. His debut novel, Strong Like You, published in 2024, was named to YALSA's Best Fiction for Young Adults list in 2025. Strong Like You was also listed on the Children's Book Council's Young Adult Favorites list, Arkansas's Gem, and was an Indiana Read Aloud book selection. Simpson's follow-up, Copefield, released in April of 2025, earned a starred review from Kirkus Reviews for its sharp writing and emotional depth. He's a longtime newspaper editor in Arkansas, and he draws his experience covering sports and community life to create emotionally grounded stories about identity, family, and resilience. So, with that, I am going to turn it over to Travis T.L. Simpson. Let's see. And let's see, is Travis there? Let's see. There he is, and you're on mute.
There we go. All good?
Perfect. We hear you perfectly.
Okay. Well, to start, I just want to say thank you for including Strong Like You as an Iowa Read Aloud book. This is my debut, so like anything that people do to recognize it is sort of mind blowing to me. Especially knowing that I wrote it uh in a dark back room, thinking that it may never go anywhere, just writing it, much like Alan said, for myself because I loved to write. Um, and it's sort of funny. He mentioned that cussing had a small role in his becoming an author, and it did for me as well. Because when I was in the fifth grade, I read my first adult novel. By that I mean a novel meant for adults, not adult, you know. Uh, and it was Jurassic Park, and it was around the time the film came out. And all my friends were crazy about the movie, and I was too. I went and saw it like 15, 16 times. But my friend handed me the book, and he said, "This is even better than the movie." And I didn't think that was possible. So I took the book home and I read it, and it was full of cuss words. And I grew up in like a pretty conservative uh, evangelical home, so it felt a little rebellious to read this book, and it made reading cool, which turned me into a lifetime reader, which inevitably led to me wanting to write stories myself. So I thought that was kind of funny that you mentioned that Alan mentioned getting to say "damn" made him a celebrity, which made him get interested in being creative, and I kind of a similar thing. Um, but I have long a little bit about like where I came from and what led to writing this book. I have long wanted to write stories. I wanted to write books way back right after I finished reading Jurassic Park. I was already thinking of my own versions of Jurassic Park, but I never really bothered to learn what it meant to write a good story outside of just having a bit of an ear for line level writing. I didn't bother learning about hero's journey. I didn't bother learning how the craft actually worked. I just hit the ground running, writing sentences, practicing that aspect of it, of being a good line level writer. Um, and for a long time, I was doing this thing where I would write when the spirit struck me or whenever I felt motivated to write, and then I wouldn't write for a long time. And eventually, well into my adulthood, I decided I am reaching a point where if I don't actually chase this dream, it's not going to happen. So I need to get serious about it. And I need to write it. I need to write daily, um, and I need to figure out what other people are doing to be successful. And it still didn't really occur to me that there was a this is silly to say, but that there was a craft to writing that was more than just writing good turns of phrases. Um, and I was working at the newspaper as a sports reporter, and I was getting this inside look into um, the world of sports and the way that they grind, like football teams will grind towards their goal. It's just a daily thing. You show up and you do the work, and it's not a glamorous, beautiful thing. It's just you do it, and so I sort of put that in my back pocket. And then I was also working because if you know anything about newspapers, they don't pay a whole lot of money. I was also working part time at a library in the children's section, and I was shelving books and I was helping out with programming, and I was playing my guitar for the kids during story time, and I loved it. I would always say that I had two jobs that I loved, and some people would go their whole life unable to find a job that they love, and here I was with two that were just so fulfilling and so much fun. But my favorite part of that job was shelving books, and that's because I could put my headphone in and listen to audiobooks. And one day I was already like seven manuscripts in of chasing this author dream, but just flying by the seat of my pants, pantsing, as a lot of authors call it. And I was listening to an audiobook and shelving books and going up and down the stacks. And it got to this point in the story. It was the climax of the story where all of the elements sort of came together and it just punched me in the gut. And I mean, I cried. And but partially I cried because I had the realization finally that I should have had probably 10 years ago, that the author had done this intentionally, that this was by design from the first page, something that the author had done, and I didn't know how to do that. So I um, bought a whole bunch of craft books and I started reading and I started to really try and understand and began to understand how stories actually work. And the first manuscript I wrote after that got me my agent. And the second book I wrote after that was Strong Like You, which sold. A lot of people ask me, why did I write Strong Like You? And it comes from my journalism background. Uh, as I mentioned previously, I was a sports reporter. And again, if you know very much about newspapers, there's no such thing as a single beat reporter. I was also doing community stories. I was covering like the most city council and crime. And it was sports and crime, the marriage of sports and crime that really led to Strong Like You. It's a bit of a crime story. It's a bit of a sports story. There's a little bit of a mystery in there. But what the seed I think that really planted it was having this access to these football programs, which I sort of saw as they had a dichotomy. Like I grew up playing football, and I loved football to a degree, but at the same time, I saw it as kind of toxic. Like it was very problematic. It not only with just like the CTE, but just like the kind of just toxic culture that's within a lot of programs. I don't want to say every program. Um, but then also seeing how there would be certain kids who have maybe really difficult home lives, or they don't have strong father figures or even strong mother figures or anybody really guiding them uh, on which way they should go in life or how to be a good person, and how they kind of needed football or they needed a coach or somebody. And very often in these small rural Arkansas communities that I was covering, it was the football coach who slid into that role and kind of tried to bring them up. And very often they would say it's not about the scoreboard. And I saw plenty of teams lose every game. So, that wasn't about the scoreboard. That coach is there to help those kids. Um, but then fast forward, and I would be covering crime and I would be in a probable cause hearing, and they would bring a kid in handcuffs who I'd covered 3 years previously. And he was scoring touchdowns every Friday night and seemed like he had his stuff together. And then once that world ended, he just went down the same road that his father went down, or his grandfather, or all the people around him went down. And so I really got curious about that kid. What is that kid's life really like? And how do you be a good person if all of the examples you have are bad? How do you rise above the situation that you were just born into? Um, and so that's where Strong Like You came from. It's a little bit of a deconstruction of toxic ideas of what it means to be a man. We often think uh, it's often called toxic masculinity, like it's not showing emotion, being stoic, always being strong in every situation. And then we separate that and we say, well, this is what good masculinity looks like. It's taking care of those under your weaker than you, or protecting people weaker than you. But I didn't feel like that was accurate at all, because the good masculinity was just being a good person. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. And so I wanted to deconstruct all of that and build back something better and say that strength isn't about being physically strong. It isn't about closing off your scary emotions or your bad feelings. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being willing to be honest about your life, about the way you are feeling, and opening up to other people, and also being able to just self-express. And that's why Walker, throughout the story, writes free verse poetry at the encouragement of his school counselor. And I feel like this is a really important message, because we live in a world where 132 men die by suicide every single day. 93.3% of our prisons are filled up with men. Almost all domestic violence is committed by men. Um, we're doing something wrong as a society, in the way that we're raising these boys, in the way we're teaching them to think about their place in the world. And I find it to be incredibly important to find a way to get them to think about these things. And my thought is that it all starts with empathy. If you ask me, and studies have shown, reading increases empathy. They say you should think about your ideal reader when you're writing a book. And my ideal reader was the protagonist of the book, Walker Lauderdale, or a kid like Walker Lauderdale. Um, he A lot of these books, a lot of books like this, I think sometimes are windows into their worlds, and I really wanted to hold up a mirror instead. Um, there's a football guy on the cover, but really there's very little football in the book. The football is sort of a cradle that the story rests in, and to me, it's the perfect metaphor for for strength, and for toxic masculinity. It's this powerful force in our society that sort of um, teaches a lot of these bad lessons, but there's sort of a undercurrent to it, that a dichotomy to it for that kid that just really needs some stability. Um, and so my ideal reader is a kid like Walker Lauderdale, and kids like Walker Lauderdale don't read books. So that's a pretty big problem that I have. And so for me, it's really about finding librarians who can, and teachers and people like that, who can put the book in their hands. Um, at its base, Strong Like You follows Walker as he looks for his missing father across the hills of the Ozark. He has, um, like any other boy, he idolizes his dad. He thinks his dad is the perfect example of who he should be. But as he starts to kind of dig and look into where his father is gone, it leads him into a world of organized crime and drug operations. And so he starts to realize, like, all of these things that to him were good memories were actually kind of messed up, and not great things for a kid to be involved in. And a lot of the lessons that his dad taught him were actually the exact opposite of what he really should have been learning. Um, and no kid can do that without help, and so he ends up in counseling for his anger issues, and his counselor encourages him to keep a journal. He doesn't want to write in a journal because it takes too long, so his counselor encourages him to instead write free verse poetry. And for me, I picked free verse poetry for him, one, because I think Southerners speak in a very poetic way. A lot of them are poets without realizing it. And if Walker just would write in his voice, it's a poem. And and for me, growing up, writing poetry was so instrumental in me kind of digging deep into um, my own emotions and kind of figuring out how I feel about things. And and yeah, and so I just felt like that was kind of the avenue that he could use. And then also, so many uh, men and boys see poetry as girly. And I think that's sort of funny because every rap song you've ever heard is a poem, and every song you've ever heard is a poem. We all love music, but we often see poetry as something that girls write in their diary, um, which shouldn't be the case. Um, my hope is that Strong Like You can be sort of a gateway drug to literature for these boys. Maybe they'll pick it up because there's a football guy on the cover, and it looks like it might be your average sports story about a team trying to win all their playoff and games and get through the end of the season, and it all comes down to one big moment. Uh, and discover that that's not what this is. And without ever using the term toxic masculinity, because I believe that turns some of them off, they'll immediately just put the book down. Uh, they hopefully will see themselves in Walker and realize that they agree that this way of thinking is harmful without ever recognizing that it's the same thing that everyone's been saying that they've hated. At least many of the conservative people who live around here, um, they don't like that term, toxic masculinity. Uh, it's the simple stuff like um, men don't cry or boys don't cry. Those simple things that are obviously untrue, and will say that kids internalize. Sorry, I just saw your comment in chat. Um, but yeah, to get back to that, I'd like I'd like it to be a gateway drug to literature. A lot of YA books are marketed towards young girls, and I think that's great. Um, I think the assumption is that many male readers will jump straight to adult stories, but I think we lose some readers along the way because teen boys have complicated inner lives too. They're just not exploring them in the way that they should. Um, this book was, I think, a little difficult to get published, primarily because if teen boys don't show up to the table to read, then it begs an obvious question, which is who's going to buy the book. Um, but I really think anybody could get something good out of Strong Like You. I think that I like to joke that teen girls could figure out why the boys in their life act so stupid. Uh, and not that they don't know that, surely they girls have it figured out. It's us that don't have it figured out. Um, but you know, uh, I lost my notes. Sorry. Uh, the other place that Strong Like You came from was seeing, as I mentioned earlier, the dichotomy in football of how it's toxic, but also some kids need it, but also the dichotomy in the Ozarks itself, where I live, where the book is set. I would often drive up north from where I live, which goes, I just live in the Arkansas River Valley, which is at the base of the Ozark Mountains. And just an hour's drive, you can get up in the hills and where you're away from basically everybody. And there would be all these like different stops where you could pull off the side of the road and look down over the valley, or on the other side across the mountains, further into the mountains. And when I was a kid, we would always stop and look at these, and I would be struck at how beautiful it was. I mean, you can't help but be struck by how beautiful it was. But as I started covering crime and realizing that in Pope County, where I live, um, there was a pretty serious meth problem. And those same hills that I saw as beautiful, and they are beautiful, they harbor little nests of criminal activity, little meth kitchens and sheds. So when you're looking out from those lookouts, you're seeing all of this beauty, but at the same time, you're seeing all of this corruption that's sort of like hidden. And I sort of saw that as the perfect metaphor um, for this idea of being a man. It all of the good things that we associate with it, you can't have them and not the bad things that we associate it. We have to like remove that idea of it being like being a good. It's just being a good person. It's not being a good man. Um, and I think with that, I am open to some questions. I think I'm the right spot for that.
Absolutely. Um, wow, just there's so much. I love your comment about being a man is not just being a good man, being a good person. I love that. And that was something the committee, when we were reading the book, we noticed about the toxic masculinity and versus good masculinity. Um, that was what really drew us to the book. And I'm just curious with Walker, how did you capture his voice? How can you walk us through the process of how you developed Walker?
Yeah, it's a very voicey book. And that's I know I don't have it, but that's the voice that I hear every day, talking to these kids. And it's like it's a lot of times when you think of the South, a lot of and especially when I listen to a lot of audiobooks and movies, the um, the Southern accent that they use is like I would say it's more like a Tennessee or Appalachian accent, and the Ozark,
Mhm.
Arkansas Southern accent is just a whole lot more gritty and plain. And so I just really tried to capture that. Um, and like I said, it is really just that's what I would hear from these kids.
Thank you. Lauren, she's one of our team committee members. She has a question. She says, as you were writing the story, did you gain any new perspectives as you were diving deeper into these characters?
Um, that's a really good question. I mean, yeah, I tried to really um I grew up with I get asked this question a lot, which is uh well, was your dad like Walker's dad? And the answer is no. The answer is no. I had a great dad. Um and I didn't grow up in poverty like Walker did, but I grew up kind of adjacent to it. Um
Mhm.
and this book part of what this book did is help me really sympathize with people born into situations that are they're not invisible. You can see them, but we often look the other way. Um, and I think this book really helped me kind of see uh, that sometimes with these kids that end up in these really bad situations, there's a heartbreak there. There's a scene in Strong Like You where Walker uh, beats up another kid. They get into a huge fight on the
Yeah.
football field in the middle of a game. And just saying that, you would be like, "Oh gosh, that's terrible," and it is terrible. But when you're reading it, you know why Walker's doing it,
Hmm.
and and you can see that in his mind and in the way that he thinks, and in with all of his upbringing and the way he's been sort of molded into this wrecking ball of a person, um, that he has no choice. He has to beat up this kid, or his whole worldview is false. Um, and so it helped me to understand like these kinds of kids, they have with they have a lot more going on in their lives than what is just right on the surface.
Absolutely. Thank you. Um, Reading this, I remember Chloe, the character Chloe, and her and Walker, and just how that relationship was there and then it wasn't. I'm trying not to spoil it for people who haven't read it, but can you talk about how you develop those scenes, especially, because this is Walker's kind of first crush
Yeah,
and how that relationship peaks and kind of
yeah.
fizzles.
Well, I think without spoiling it, I think I can say that the most important thing that I was trying to get across there is consent, because
Yeah.
in a lot of stories, um, the male character may get rejected at some point by his love interest, and then he pursues her to the end of the earth, and then she finally takes him in, and they're happy. But that's not real life, and that shouldn't be real life. That's actually kind of scary in real life. Um,
Yeah.
and so the idea of consent was really important to me in that relationship to really show like if someone says yes or no, like you have to accept their answer, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved the relationship between Walker and Mr. Raines, the counselor that's helping him. Can you talk a little bit about that point of view and why was it important to show that relationship and building up Walker to being who he is?
Yeah. So Mr. Raines is named sort of after my high school creative writing teacher, who was Mrs. Raines, although they're not very similar in personality. Uh, it was important to me because I don't think that any of us get through this without help.
Hmm.
And especially kids who have the odds stacked against them the way Walker does. And it takes somebody that's willing to deal with the rough edges and love on a kid. And that to me is teachers and counselors and librarians.
Yeah. Yes, librarians are amazing. Especially librarians. I mean, we are just those we're like social workers almost because teens tell us so much. They tell us things sometimes they won't tell their parents.
Yeah, and that's something that I saw working in the library briefly. And it was so interesting to me how much, even me, just as the guy that shelved books and played the guitar, meant to those kids. I would see them years later, and they had grown up, and they would come running up to me because they remembered that I sang like the Itsy Bitsy Spider to them during a
Mhm.
story time or whatever. And I can't even imagine how much more impactful a teen librarian is, or a children's librarian who is with that kid their whole youth.
Yes, absolutely. So what are the other items are you working on now, or what's next on the horizon for you?
So my third book, Accelerant, comes out in 2026. We're in like I think the final stages of cleaning that or editing that, developmental edits. Um, and it's about a kid living in southeast Missouri, which is where I also have roots. And he lives, unfortunately, this is very much based on real life stuff that I experienced covering crime. He lives in a small town that's in the Boston Mountain or the St. Francis Mountains, I mean, and in the outskirts of his community, there's a whites only white supremacy compound that also is a drug operation, and they end up targeting some of his friends, and
Wow.
he being a giant anime nerd and really big into professional wrestling, decides he's gonna put on a mask and be a vigilante, and it's sort of an exploration of like violence, like um, violence creates more violence, and you can
Hmm.
create problems for people that you're trying to protect by stepping in and doing things for them that they didn't ask you to do. So that's Accelerant. It comes out 2026. And Cope Field actually also was that's my sophomore novel. That was actually named one of the top 100 books by Kirkus Reviews last year, which wasn't. I don't think I sent that to you at the time, but um, so we're kind of chugging along.
It's amazing. And I love how you tie the whole crime aspect to it because I think that could be a lead-in for teens to read because with true crime and on with crime being so just all over the place, that might be a lead-in for teens um to read.
I certainly hope so.
So, if anyone, does anyone have any other questions they want to share or ask real quick? Looks like Emily, our children's committee member, she said, I'm looking forward to reading Strong Like You and The Quiet Librarian. So thank you to Travis and Alan both. And Alex, she's also our teen committee member. She said, thank you. This has been amazing. I'm just so excited that you are here with us and that we chose Strong Like You for this year's All Our Reads honor.
Well, thank you so much. It's a huge honor, like I said. And I mean, and also, my ideal reader doesn't read, so I need you guys to put it in those kids' hands.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you worked in a library. I love it. And story
Mhm.
time. And what great memories. So it's awesome to see that progression from your love of story time and shelving books and working in a library to putting books into readers' hands. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. And thank you to the teen committee members that are here with us. Thank you so much. And we are going to switch gears one last time. And now we are going to turn to the children's or the kids selection for this year's Kids All I Reads program. We have our five kids committee members, and they did a fantastic job selecting books for children ages 8 to 12. Again, reading 50 pages of each book, winnowing that list down to about five or six titles, and then finishing those books and having meaningful and thoughtful conversations and choosing a book and a short list with books that have mass appeal for all for all kids in Iowa. So, this year's Kids Committee members, I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you again to our Kids Committee members, Emily Hagee from Scott County Library System, Jonathan Basie from Van Meter Public Library, Becky Bilby from Sioux Center Public Library, Nicole Annis from Keosauqua Public Library, and Morgan Simmons from Sheffield Public Library. They did a fantastic job choosing and selecting books. So if you see them, if you know them, make sure you tell them thank you, and especially in the chat, please give them their flowers and round of applause. Thank you to the Kids Committee members. And our final speaker for today is Kate Messner, who wrote the book The Trouble with Heroes. And before we turn it over to Kate, I just want to say a couple of words from her biography. Kate Messner is a New York Times bestselling author. She's passionate and curious and writes books that encourage kids to wonder and have that curiosity too. Her books include award-winning picture books like Over and Under the Snow, Over and Under the Wetland, The Next Scientist, and The Scariest Kitten in the World. She's also written novels such as Breakout and Chirp, the Fergus and Zeke Easy Reader series, Ranger in Time chapter books, which are very popular, and the popular History Smashers graphic nonfiction series. Kate also leads the multi-author team behind the Kids in Mr. Z's class chapter books, and she is also working on the upcoming graphic novel series Camp Monster. Her books have been selected for the New York Times Notable, Junior Library Guild, IndieBound, and the Bank Street College of Education Best Book Selections. Her novel, The Brilliant Fall of Guyana Z, won the E.B. White Read Aloud Medal, and her science picture books have been finalists for the American Academy for the Advancement of Sciences Subaru SB and F Prize for excellence in science writing. And before becoming a full-time writer, Kate was a TV news reporter as well as an educator who spent 15 years teaching middle school English. She lives on Lake Champlain with her family and is a proud Adirondack 46er. So would you please join me in welcoming Kate Messner?
Well,
And
thank
I'm
you
going to turn
so
to her.
much. Thanks so much for that nice welcome. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much to the committee for selecting The Trouble with Heroes as an All Iowa Reads for the coming year. I cannot tell you, I did a little dance around the kitchen when I got that email letting me know. I am so excited. I love community-wide reads. And just listening to Alan and Travis talk about their books, I can only imagine the intergenerational conversations just because of the overlap in themes and big ideas. And gosh, there's going to be so much to talk about this year. And I'm so excited that The Trouble with Heroes is going to be a part of that. So I'm going to actually go ahead and share my screen. I'm just sending a request to unshare the other one so that I can go ahead and share some slides with you. Um, I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk with you in depth about The Trouble with Heroes, but I will say that some of you probably know me from some of my other books as well. And just so you can make that connection between the other titles in your library. I know you'll be sharing The Trouble with Heroes with your upper elementary school kids. But if younger readers want in on the action and want to be part of those conversations, you can absolutely share some of my books for littles with them. I'm the author of the Over and Under Nature series from Chronicle Books. I've written other picture books, The Scariest Kitten in the World, First Ascent, which is a Yosemite rock climbing story. I do the Easy Reader series, Fergus and Zeke. I've got a couple more fun picture books coming out this spring, The Whale's Tale and The Otter's Side of the Story, which can be read from front to back or from the last page to the first page. And if you read it one way, it's the whale's point of view. And if you read it backwards, it's the otter's point of view. And then Axolotl Ella is on the way in June. That is a retelling of the classic fairy tale, but with axolotls. And if you don't know what an axolotl is, ask your elementary school readers because I promise you they know. I'm also the author of a dozen other novels for young readers, of the Ranger in Time chapter books, a new chapter book series called Wildlife Rescue, all about kids whose families volunteer with a wildlife hospital to rescue injured wildlife. There are two of those books out now, How to Save an Otter and How to Save an Owl. And then we've got How to Save a Tortoise coming in March. As you heard, I'm coordinator for the multi-author chapter book series, The Kids in Mrs. Z's Class. So I wrote the first book, Emma McKenna Full Out, and assembled just an amazing team of authors to collaborate on the other books in this series. So this is about all the kids in one third grade class. For your third grade readers, third grade might be a little bit young for The Trouble with Heroes, but hand them the first book in this series, and I promise they will be hooked. And then I'm also the author of the History Smasher series. These are graphic nonfiction. So nonfiction stories all aimed at smashing common myths that we hear about in history sometimes. There are 11 books out now, and book 12, History Smashers, The Space Race, is on the way in 2026. And then one more, my first graphic novel. People joke that, like, well, when are you going to write this and when are you going to write that? And I am one of those authors who loves to try new things. And so this is a new one for me, a graphic novel called Camp Monster, coming out a month from now, actually, early February. And this one is all about a summer camp for monsters that's run by a family of Yetis. It used to be just a Yeti camp, but then, Yeti enrollment was down, so they decided to open it up to all different monsters with chaotic and hilarious results. So that'll be out next month. But right now, I want to talk with you about The Trouble with Heroes. This book is set where I live in northern New York, and this is a picture literally looking out my back window. I live just south of Plattsburgh, New York, on Lake Champlain, just a touch north of the Adirondack Mountains, where I spend lots and lots of time hiking. As you heard in the introduction, I am an Adirondack 46er. That was a goal that I set for myself in August 2015. And that's really where the trouble with heroes got started that summer. I decided that I wanted to climb all 46 of the highest mountains in the Adirondacks. There are 46 mountains in the Adirondacks over 4,000 feet tall, and it's a thing to climb all of them. They call it becoming an Adirondack 46er. And the hikes are wildly different. They range from shorter hikes that are maybe 6 or 7 miles long. I can't say that in school visits anymore. So if I visit your library or school, I will tell kids the hikes are 5 or 6 miles long because, 6, 7, you can't do that. But the hikes range from like half-day hikes like that with a couple thousand feet of elevation gain to absolute full-day slogs that involve, knee-deep mud and cliff, near vertical cliff climbs and things like that. So there are 46 of these mountains, and it took me about 8 years to climb them all over 8 summers and falls. And coincidentally, that is also about how long it took me to write The Trouble with Heroes. So this book actually started off when I was hiking the 46. I found that I was wanting to write poetry when I got to the summit. And as I mentioned, these hikes are very varied. They're very, very different. Some of them you hike, 7 or 8 miles and you get to the top and there is this gorgeous sweeping view and you feel like you can see the whole world from up there. But sometimes you get to the top of a 46er mountain and there is no view because it's a wooded summit. The summit is not actually above tree line. So you might hike 10 miles through knee-deep mud, and the only way you know you're finally at the top is because somebody has tacked a crummy little sign to a tree that says, "Seymour Mountain." And you get there and you slump down by the side and say, yeah, I wish I could see more mountain. So as I mentioned, a lot of variety in these hikes. Did I mention the mud? Oh, the mud, the mud, the mud. But once you climb them all, like 350 some miles and thousands of feet of elevation gain, they give you a little patch. And I have to tell you, I have never been prouder of this little patch. So while I was climbing the 46 mountains, I brought my writer's notebook. And that is no surprise because I bring my writer's notebook everywhere I go. I did have a paperback, more slender one for hiking because nobody wants to add an extra pound to their backpack when you're going 22, 24 miles. But I found that I was wanting to write poetry on the summits of the mountains. Again, not super unusual for me because I've always loved writing poetry. And so at first I was writing poems like this one, a poem that I would just read when I got to a mountain summit, right when I got to a mountain summit. This one's called When You Meet Two People Hiking Together. Sometimes one has been there before and they're so excited to show their friend like it's a present. Come with me up these roots and rocks, and there's a surprise at the end. Then they step out of the trees onto some summit or overlook, and whoa! Purple mountains and a wave-rippled lake wrapped in sky and trees and cloud shadow tied up in a bow. The person who hasn't been there before just stares out at the view. The person who has takes a quick look too, but mostly they look at their friend. Do you love this gift I planned? Isn't it the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? It is, right? Then they turn back and look out again, as if they're seeing it for the first time too. So for my first couple years hiking the Adirondack 46ers, I was scribbling poems like this one. And somewhere along the way, though, another voice crept in. I sat down to write a poem in my writer's notebook, and it came out in a voice that wasn't mine, which sounds creepy, but the writers, Travis and Alan understand what I mean by that. We hear our characters' voices, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. It means somebody's showing up that wants to have a story written about them. But this voice, this other voice that arrived, it was not my voice. It was younger. It was angry. Actually, angry sad is probably a better description. And it was snarky as could be. And poems started coming out in that voice. And I said, "Ooh, who are you? And what's the story here?" So, this is one of the first poems I wrote in that other voice. I had been hiking with my hiking partner, and we were on probably a 16 or 17-mile hike. And on our way back, we were really tired and we were getting kind of silly. And we came to this tree that had mushrooms growing out of it. And look at the mushroom on the side. What does that look like to you? Doesn't it look like an ear sticking out from the tree? So I said, "Marcia, shh, don't talk now. But that tree has an ear. Don't say anything." And so we goofed and we pretended we were taking pictures telling the tree secrets. And later that day, I wrote this poem. You learn a lot about a person hiking together. It's not just what they tell you. They raise cows or climb rocks or coach hockey. It's other stuff too. How fit they are, how fast they hike. You learn who whines about mud and who splashes like a little kid, who takes breaks for M&Ms and who just wants to power through. You learn what a person stops to look at, waterfalls or mushrooms or tiny brown toads. And whether or not you want to, you learn about yourself. Who knew I was a mud-splashing M&M break kind of guy? And surprise, I have a thing for mushrooms? I never knew they came in so many colors. Moonlight white and yellow gold, red with white polka dots like a gnome's umbrella. Once, I saw an ear-shaped mushroom growing right out of the bark of a tree, like it was waiting for me to tell it a secret. If I had, I'd have whispered, I might like these mountains more than I want to admit. So that voice belonged to Finn Connolly, the main character in The Trouble with Heroes. I will share that many of the characters in this book were inspired by people that I met when I was out hiking, as was the Bernese Mountain Dog that you see on the cover of the book. This good girl in the photo is a dog named Isabel, who I met while I was hiking. I stopped to pet her and say hello, and she drooled all over me. And Isabel was the inspiration for Seymour in the book. So Finn, that kiddo you see on the cover with the orange backpack, is a 7th grader who is having just a rough year. His dad passed away 2 years before the book begins. And he's about to fail 7th grade because he won't do what he calls the stupid 7th grade poetry project. And on the Friday before Memorial Day, he vandalizes a cemetery. He kicks over a gravestone that it turns out belonged to one of the first women to hike all 46 Adirondack high peaks. And this kid cannot catch a break. He gets caught on camera and hauled into court. And when he does, the dead woman's daughter makes him the weirdest offer. She says, "Look, you want to get out of trouble? I will drop all the charges today. You don't even have to pay for the busted headstone if you agree to climb all 46 Adirondack high peaks in a single summer." And that is where the story begins. So this is what we call a multimodal novel. It is mostly written in verse. This is my outline. I use a program called Scrivener. I don't know if Alan or Travis ever played around with that. It's my favorite tool for drafting. Once I get to revising, I use Microsoft Word and go back and forth with the comments with my editor. But for drafting, I love Scrivener. And this book starts with, as I mentioned, it's mostly verse, but it starts with this. If I were a better kid, this story would begin with my 7th grade diploma. Instead, it starts with this. And we have a newspaper article about the cemetery vandalism. The book has lots of poems. It's got all haiku. It has free verse poetry. It also includes text messages and photographs. Those are photos that I took while I was hiking the 46 high peaks. And one of my favorite elements, and I'm going to read you a little excerpt here, are the choose your own disaster sequences. These are extremely fun to read aloud to kids, and they're a little interactive. So I am going to go ahead and pause so that if you'd like, you can make your choices in the chat. There will be choices after each choose your own disaster paragraph or two. So this section is actually based on a nonfiction book that I read called At the Mercy of the Mountains, True Stories of Survival and Tragedy in New York's Adirondacks. And what happens is, in the story, Finn is just about to start these 46 high peaks that he's got to hike in one summer. And he's having real second thoughts. And he's like, maybe I can get mom to say I can't go. So he starts dropping hints about how dangerous it is, and he's probably going to get killed in an avalanche. And he leaves this book all around the house, but she's so busy. The family chocolate shop is struggling. She's too busy to even pick it up. So he starts trying to sneak in stories over dinner in the form of these choose your own disaster sequences. So he's telling his mom about this guy named George Cheney, who, by the way, I need you to realize and remember as you listen to this, was a real historic person, a mountain guide, and everything that happens to him in this story is actually true from his memoirs. Okay? Choose your own disaster. You are an 1800s wilderness dude, and your name is George Cheney. One day, you're out hunting, and the deer you're tailing swims away, so you chase it in your canoe. But your pistol slips off the seat and goes off, and you end up with a bullet in your leg. Do you, A, paddle your sorry butt back to shore and shout for help, or B, keep going after that deer? This is the part where you should feel free to make a decision and drop it in the chat. Okay, and I'll keep an eye there. All right, Brenda says she's going to paddle back to shore and shout for help. So is Tina. These are good choices. Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of A choices from the sensible librarians in the group. If you're George Cheney, you choose B. You catch up with the deer, shoot it. Apparently, you still have bullets to spare even after shooting yourself in the leg. You dress the carcass, hang it up, and check out your leg. It is not looking good. Do you A, find some branches, carve them into crutches, and walk 14 miles back home? Or B, realize that is a terrible idea given your injury, bandage it up, and stay put, waiting for help to arrive? What's it going to be, librarians? Seeing a healthy mix of A and B here, although a lot of A. Okay, you're starting to understand George Cheney, right? If you're George Cheney, you choose A. And you make it home alive. But you are stuck in bed for 6 months while that leg heals. Once it does, do you A, get a new job where you're less likely to shoot off your leg? Or B, head right back out to the mountains? Oh yeah, we get George Cheney now. Everybody says B. And if you're George Cheney, you totally choose B. Another time, you're out in the mountains, you're hiking along, and you see a panther crouched in a tree, looking ready to pounce and eat you for dinner. How do you want to handle this one? 4 choices this time. A, run away, run away. B, flop down and play dead. C, raise your arms to make yourself look bigger and back away very slowly, maintaining eye contact. Or D, shoot it. All right. I'm seeing lots of C's here. This is interesting. So I will tell you, you should definitely not choose A or B. If you run, you will get chased. And if you don't remain standing, that mountain lion will see you as prey. The National Park Service says you should choose C. But if you're George Cheney, you choose D. And good news, you managed to hit the panther instead of yourself this time. Later in the day, though, the temperature plunges and you don't have enough clothes to stay warm. You are a long way from home and it's getting dark. Do you A, walk through the night so you don't freeze to death? Or B, hunker down in a pile of leaves and hope for the best? What would you do? All right. If you are George Cheney, you choose none of the above. Instead, you shoot a moose that happens to be wandering by, you gut it, and spend the night snug as a bug inside your new dead moose. True story. One more, you're still George Cheney, and this time you're out hiking in snowshoes when you hit an unstable crust of snow and your leg busts through into an empty cavity the snow formed around a fallen tree. Do you A, stick around a while and take a little nap, or B, climb out of the cavity and go on your merry way? What do you think? Trick question. You can't do either of those things because there's a bear hibernating in the cavity. He was anyway until you showed up. Now the bear bursts out of the snow, snarling and growling all over the place. Do you A, run, or B, whip out your hunting knife to defend yourself? If you're George Cheney, you try to choose B, but you forget you loaned your hunting knife to a friend. But at least you still have your trusty pistol. And bonus, you remembered to reload it since you shot your leg and that panther and probably a bunch of other stuff by now. Do you A, shoot the bear, or B, use the pistol to smack the bear in the head? If you're George Cheney, you choose A. But psych, the gun doesn't work, so you have to go with plan B. Only when you swing at the bear's head, it swats the pistol out of your hand with its massive paw, and the two of you end up rolling around in the snow together. Fortunately, your dog Buck, did I mention you have a dog named Buck? You do. Your dog Buck comes to your rescue, Buck bites the bear in the butt, and then the two of you are able to get away. And I'm going to read you one last poem that comes right after this Choose Your Own Disaster sequence. And it's called, What About the Bears? That is quite a story, Mom says. I know, right? She keeps chewing her pizza. You think we should call this whole thing off, Mom? Let's see, she says. I have a glimmer of hope before she swats it away like a bear. You won't be hiking with a pistol. There are no more panthers in these mountains, and black bears don't attack people unless they're provoked, so just don't go bothering bears. Well, yeah, but what if I bust through the snow and end up breaking into its den? Finn, she looks at me over her pizza slice. It's June. The snow has melted, and you have mountains to climb. I'll drop you off at the trailhead at 8. And with that, poor Finn Connolly heads out to hike the first of his 46 mountains to get out of trouble. So if you are book talking this, if you're sharing a little teaser with kids, I highly recommend sharing maybe that first interactive Choose Your Own Disaster sequence after you tell them what it's about. I think they will absolutely be hooked. That's been my experience when I do school visits anyway. Super, super excited to connect with you. I know we're doing a webinar for families in June. And if you'd like, I can put together a webinar for Iowa schools sometime in the fall too, depending on, when you're reading, somebody can let me know about that. But thank you again for choosing this to be part of All Iowa Reads. I just can't wait for the conversations that are going to happen with these incredible 3 books that you've selected.
Wow, this was fantastic. And people are saying that they've read the book, they love the book. Um, I'm just curious there was so much in the book. I loved the poetry. I loved also with the chocolate shop. There were recipes sprinkled in this book. Spoiler alert for people who have not read it. Finn creates these cookie recipes to help save the chocolate shop. Where did you get the recipes for that? Because I can see someone reading this with their a librarian reading
Yeah.
in this with their students and saying, "Hey, why don't we, as a activity, maybe we'll make cookies in a jar so you can use
Yeah.
that at home or give those as gifts."
Yeah, I so the original idea for Finn to come up with a cookie recipe for every mountain, and not all the recipes are in the book. I made them all up. But then my editor was like, you cannot have 46 cookie recipes in the 300-page book. So some of them you're going to have to ask for, but there are a bunch of cookie recipes in the book. The original idea for that came from a real deli in Lake Placid, New York, which is a town where a lot of people start their 46er adventures. It's sort of a jumping off point for the high peaks in the Adirondacks. There's a deli that has a sandwich named for every mountain. You know, like I get a Marcy, that's a
Oh,
turkey sandwich with cheddar and apple and cranberry mayo. My
yum.
husband gets the Algonquin. So there's a sandwich, and I thought that would be a really fun thing for Finn to try out. His grandmother has owned a chocolate shop, a family chocolate shop for years that she and his mom now run. And since the pandemic started, it's really been struggling, and they are right at that turning point where they have to decide: are we gonna call it quits on this family business? And Finn comes up with this idea, which is very unlike him. He doesn't see himself as a helpful guy or an idea guy. He doesn't see himself as a good kid at all. But after he starts hiking these peaks, he comes home hungry and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to use these extra chocolate pieces in the cupboard to bake." And he remembers how much he loved to bake when he was a kid, and starts baking more and more, and comes up with this idea and realizes there's maybe more to him. Than just that kid who kicked over the gravestone. So the recipes in the book are all my recipes. Most of them are a twist on the classic chocolate chip cookie recipe that you can find on the Toll House package. But they're all my recipes. I've made all the cookies. I think I gained 5 or 6 pounds when I was drafting this book, but I hiked it all off. So
That's amazing. Mandy from Columbus Junction says, so your publisher is going to do a cookbook of all these recipes as a companion to the book? That's a good
oh, I don't know
question.
about that. There is a recipe. Yeah, there are some recipes in the book. I think there's at least 5 or 6 of them.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jonathan, one of our kids committee members, says one of my kiddo patrons read the book and then made up his own recipe and brought me the result.
No way.
That
Oh,
is
I need to
awesome,
see that.
Jonathan.
Jonathan, would you ask that reader if he would share that recipe with me so I can try it out too?
That
I
is
would love that.
amazing.
That's awesome.
Um,
Yeah, one
s-
of the schools when I did a 2-week book tour for this book when it came out at the end of April, and one of the schools I had visited, they had somebody try every recipe, and so they had all of the cookies there to sample, which was super fun. It's even making one of the recipes is a great way to plan your refreshments around book club or your library event for this book.
Absolutely. What has been, since you said you've been doing book tours with this book, what has been the response from kids just from reading the book and have they wrote to you or what has been the response from them?
Yeah, honestly, pretty overwhelming. As I think you mentioned in the introduction, I taught middle school for 15 years, and so Finn is a kid that I know in my heart of hearts. He's that kid who used to walk into my classroom, um, you know, usually a boy, uh, usually had stuff going on at home that he didn't want to share,
Yeah.
and just with a huge chip on his shoulder and a lot of snark in his voice. And I loved those kids. I did. I always wanted to know what was underneath it. Sometimes those kids were the best poets. It's just amazing. And so, um, I don't know. He's really a kid after my own heart, and I have gotten sidetracked, and I think I forgot the original question, but I don't know if that answered it.
Oh, just what has been the response from kids? I mean, have they said, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is
So
amazing"?
yes, I get piles and piles of emails. It's interesting because I don't just get emails from kids about this book. I get I get more than the usual amount of email from young readers, but I
Hmm.
also am getting email from people in their 20s,
Wow.
who, lost a parent when they were younger and told me they found the book and wished they'd had it when they were 12 or 13. I'm getting emails from people who love hiking and just appreciate that someone gets the power that it has in our lives. I did a book club that was full of senior citizens who love the story. But the kids love the multimodal aspects. I mean, they love Finn, they love Seymour. They love the adventure. And the multimodal aspect really seems to work for them. I mean, that's how we encounter text in our everyday lives so often. It's not just paragraphs. We're encountering, music lyrics and text messages and photographs and reports and web pages. And to be able to synthesize all that, I think is a really interesting reading experience and one that really resonates with kids.
I love how this book is so accessible with the different types of text, like the text, the journal or the poetry, the newspaper clipping. I love that. Why did you make it so accessible? Because it is amazing. Because for kids, I know sometimes we deal with reluctant readers all the time. Can you walk me through the process of how you made it so accessible?
Oh, thank you, first of all. So I taught middle school. I taught seventh grade for 15 years. And a lot of times people will ask, well, how do you get the voice of a 12-year-old kid right?
Yes.
I say because I have the voices of 1,000 seventh graders still living in my head. I don't forget my kids. And those voices are will always be a part of me. And so voice doesn't isn't something I struggle with usually. Once I know who the kid is, it sort of floods in just because I know that kid, I know that guy who shows up for English and he thinks your project is stupid and he doesn't want to do it, and yet still there's something there for him, and he's good at it, and that just can make a huge difference, I think. So as far as accessibility, I that's always my goal when I write a book is to write a book that kids are going to love. I
Mhm.
don't worry too much about the grown-ups, even though I very much appreciate y'all. I want to write a book that kids are dying to read, the book that they pass to each other and talk about in lunch. And so when I was teaching, I always wanted to find those books for my kids too. And so I read so widely and still do. And I think that's really probably my biggest secret as a writer is that I read everything and you start to get a sense for what kids will really engage with. Um, I will say I love being a full-time writer, but I do miss my classroom only
Mhm.
because when I was teaching, my superpower was finding the one book that would turn a kid into a reader. And it was the best part of my job was putting a book in a kid's hand when that kid didn't think they liked to read, and then they came
Yep.
back just on fire and looking for something else. I absolutely loved it. And so that always makes my day. And I've heard from not only some kids, but parents and teachers with the trouble with heroes that their kid is not a reader, but they loved this book. And to me, there's no greater compliment.
Thank you. What do you hope that they take away from reading The Trouble with Heroes? What do you hope kids take away from this novel?
At the beginning of this book, it's very clear that Finn does not think he's a good kid, and his self-worth is very low, and he's sort of stunned that nobody gives up on him.
Mhm.
And that's probably my favorite thing about the book is that he realizes that he's not lost. He's not as lost as he thought.
Yep.
And if there's one idea I hope not only kids, but also the adults who work with kids take away from this, it's that nobody's a lost cause and that everybody's voice is important. And all those kids, the ones who come into your class snarky or come into the library a little rowdy or, even mean sometimes, there's stuff going
Mhm.
on and there's some good underneath there.
That is amazing. Oh my goodness. And I have one more question for you. You have so many different projects. I mean, just seeing the History Smashers and then Camp Munster, and I loved Camp Munster. How do you make time for all these different projects?
Um, I'm going to be honest, right now I'm struggling this month. It'll be better next month, but I do have a couple deadlines that have overlapped. So at this particular moment in time, I am working on, I just finished revising the next History Smashers book, which is about
Hmm.
wildfires. And I'm working on revisions for a new novel that I will have coming out in 2027. And that book is also for upper elementary, middle school readers. And it's a Broadway ghost story. It's called Keep the Ghost Light On. And it's my first foray into middle grade horror. And parts of it are written in stage play musical format, and directed by a ghost. So there's a lot going on in that book too. But that's what I love about writing is I kind of feel like if it's not a challenge and if I already know how to write the book, it's a little less
Mhm.
fun.
Awesome. Well, oh my goodness. Emily says horror. I love that. Well, yes, I love it too.
There's some
So
scary ghosts in there.
gotta love it. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for sharing this wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much. Everyone is saying their thank yous in the chat, so we really, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all for having me today, and thanks to everybody for being here.
Awesome. Well, everyone, you have heard from all three authors. There you have it. You've heard from all three All Ira Reads authors today and their amazing books. But before we close, I want to make sure that you have some resources available to you and that you're aware of those resources. Um, we have bought copies of all the three All I Reads winning titles, and we have made book discussion sets. So if you are interested in reserving a book club set, you should contact your district LRT. For the central and southeast districts, contact Dory. Dory will be able to get you set up with a book club set. If your library is situated in north central and northeast districts, please contact Trisha Frazier. Trisha will get you hooked up. And for the northwest southwest districts, if your library is in those quadrants, please contact Amanda, who's our webinar producer today. Any of these guys will be more than happy to get a book club reserved and sent to your library. So there's their contact information on the screen, and it's also available on our website as well. And another big announcement, save the date. Kate had mentioned the June webinars, and yes, a lot of you are in the throes of planning summer reading right now. Please mark your calendars and save the date for the free summer author webinars from the state library. So this is a great opportunity in June where you at your library can have viewing parties for kids, teens, or adults. This is going to be a summer author webinar just for your kids, your teens, or adults on the dates listed below. So on Tuesday, June 9th, we will have Kate Messner from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. For adults, Alan Eskens will be available on Tuesday, June 16th from 6:30 to 7:30. And for teens, Travis T.L. Simpson will be available on June 24th from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. This is a great opportunity for your libraries. This can be part of your summer reading programs. You just sign up, and during those webinars, we will have the authors there, and we will have the teen poet ambassador from the Iowa Student Poet Ambassador Program. They will interview the children's author and the teen author. And you at home or at your library, the kids, teens, or adults can ask questions of the authors in real time via Zoom. Registration for all of these webinars will open in spring 2026, so stay tuned. Also, if you need more resources, please check out the State Library of Iowa's All Our Reads webpage. We have lots of resources related to the current titles. We also have the previous winners from previous years. We have short lists, book discussion questions, read-alikes. So if your kids or adults or teens love that book, guess what? We've got read-alikes that could tie into those books. And we have promotional items to promote the All Our Reads programs at your library. Emily Bainter, our information specialist, she created Canva poster templates, press releases, sample press releases that you can use to promote an All I Reads program at your library. So check out the All I Reads webpage. And really quickly, we have some more upcoming events. Don't forget, on the 21st of January, we have Pop YS Live, Summer in the Small Library from 1 to 2 p.m. And also on January 27th, we'll have Check It Out. Check It Out returns, where I book talk 30 books in an hour. So that'll be from 11 to 12 p.m. on Tuesday, January 27th. And Thursday, January 29th, don't forget we have our iLock conference, which the theme is Worth Celebrating. Registration is open for that conference, and it's an all-day online event. You can check out all of these and register on Workday Learning. And if you need more book suggestions, because you can't run out of books, you got to have some more books. Please join us on Tuesday, February 10th from 11 a.m. to noon, where we will cover the shortlist. It's called All Our Reads Exploring the Shortlist webinar. Helen, myself, and members of the adult committee will give short book talks of the shortlisted titles that are on the adult, teen, and kids categories. Again, you can register on Workday Learning for that webinar. It's a fun, fast-paced webinar where we give lots of shortlisted titles for those categories. So, with that, I just want to say, on behalf of Helen and myself, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Our thanks to Kate, Alan, and Travis for joining us, and everyone in Library Land. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you very soon. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.